Hello, Foundations of Algebra students. This is Mr. Mills back again. We're going to look at Unit 1, Lesson 3, Order of Operations, Order of Operations and Absolute Value. Now, this lesson may be a bit of a review. I know there's some things that you already learned in your previous classes, but we want to review and make sure that everybody's on the same and equal footing before we get into some new insights. Here are our learning objectives for today. Students will be able to evaluate expressions using absolute value, and students will be able to evaluate expressions using the order of operations. So let's get started with absolute value. Absolute value is defined as the distance from 0 on a number line. Let's look at some examples. First off, the absolute value of negative 13 is going to be 13 spaces from 0, so that answer is 13. Likewise, the absolute value of 21 is just 21. So absolute value, because it is a distance, it's always positive. Now, for a few examples, the absolute value of 9 plus the absolute value of negative 8. The first thing that we're going to do is we have to actually evaluate inside the absolute value bars before we can do that addition between those. So that's 9 plus 8, and 9 plus 8 is 17. Let's look at another one. Absolute value of negative 11 minus the absolute value of negative 5. Same thing again. We're going to do the absolute value portion first. That's 11 minus 5. And 11 minus 5 is going to give us 6. Okay. Last one. The absolute value of 21 minus 17. Well, in this case, we're going to have to do the computation inside of the absolute value before we can take the absolute value. So 21 minus 17 is going to give us 4, and the absolute value of 4 is still a positive 4. Now, on to the order of operations. Let's look at the order of operations. Like I said, this is probably just a review, but just want to clarify and point out a couple of things. The order of operations is a method of simplifying expressions using a specified order. The acronym PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, there are lots of things that you probably have been taught to help remember this order correctly. Well, the P stands for parentheses, or grouping symbols. Absolute value also counts here. E stands for exponents. I want you to notice something. Multiply and divide. This is where kids often get confused. Multiply and divide are actually on the same level. And when you see both of those operations, you do whatever you get to first, going from left to right. And the same thing with adding and subtracting. If you see both of the operations, you do whatever you see first from left to right. We'll see that in the examples in just a moment. All right, so examples. Evaluate each expression. So for our first one, 7 plus 54 divided by 3 times 2. Well, the only thing in our parentheses is the 2. So the next thing will be exponents. We don't see any. Next thing will be multiply and divide. Well, multiply and divide, going from left to right, the first thing that we see here is to divide by 3. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to divide by 3. 54 divided by 3 is 18. So now you have 7 plus 18 times 2. Well, we're going to multiply before we add. So that's 7 plus 36. 7 plus 36 is 43. Let's look at another example. 17 minus 2 to the 5th power divided by 4 plus 6. All right, so the first thing, there are no parentheses. Second thing, we're looking at exponents. So the first thing we're going to do is evaluate the exponent. 2 to the 5th is 32. Now, once we do the exponent, now it's multiply, divide. Well, we don't see any multiplying, but we do have division. So we're going to divide 32 divided by 4. So you have 17 minus 8 plus 6. Now you have a minus and a plus, but we're going from left to right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do 17 minus 8, which is 9 plus 6, and that gives us our answer of 15. We have a couple more examples, and then you'll be able to practice. If you already know how to do this, remember what we're shooting for is 80% mastery on the practice, so you can go ahead, do your mastery check, and move on to the next lesson. So more examples. So this one, parentheses, 7 minus 2 squared, close parentheses, plus 17. And all that's over the fraction bar, negative 14 plus 2 times 5. So the way that I want you to think about these problems is treat the numerator and the denominator, the top and the bottom. Treat them like two different problems all the way to the last step. Okay, so the first thing at the top, we have parentheses, so we're going to look inside of that. We got an exponent, that's where we're going to start at the top. And for the bottom, we're going to start with multiplication. All right, so 2 squared is 4 at the top. So we still have parentheses, 7 minus 4, close parentheses, plus 17. In the bottom, we have negative 14 plus 10. All right, so parentheses at the top, we're going to evaluate that first, the 7 minus 4. And at the bottom, we just have one step, the negative 14 plus 10, so we can go ahead and simplify that. So 7 minus 4, let's take a note, that's going to be 3. 3 plus 17 gives us the 20. And then here with the negative 14 and the 10, that's negative 4. Now we're going to do this last step. 20 divided by negative 4, that's what gives us, the excuse me, that's what gives us the negative 5. All right, our last one. Absolute value of negative 7 squared plus 3 squared times 4. So we have plus 18 divided by 2 times 5. Let me say that again. The absolute value of negative 7 squared plus 3 squared times 4. That's the end of the absolute value. Plus 18 divided by 2 times 5. Remember, we said at the beginning the absolute value is going to work the same way as the parentheses, so we have to start with that. So we have exponents inside of that, so that's how we're going to start our simplification. We have the negative 7 squared, so we're going to do 7 squared, which is 49, and then we have the negative, and then we have 3 squared, which is 9. So we have negative 49 plus 9 times 4 in absolute values. Looking at the part after that, 18 divided by 2, we're going to do the division first before we multiply. 18 divided by 2 is 9 times the 5. All right, now, still looking inside of that absolute value, our next operation is going to be to multiply. So we have negative 49 plus 36 in the absolute value. 9 times 5 is 45. So now, let's look at the absolute value one last time. Negative 49 plus 36 is negative 13. The 45 just comes down. The absolute value of negative 13 is positive 13. Plus 45 is 58. So this gives you 4 examples. Hopefully you will take in good notes. If not, you're going to need to rewind the tape. Make sure you have these examples written out so you can see them. So now you can go to get started on the practice. We'll talk to you in the next video. Remember, you get feedback after every practice and also after every mastery check.